when we lockdowns began. And we got kind of suddenly coerced and into having to spend much more time at home. I was fortunate in that I had a job which required me to be there in person. I was taking care of vulnerable adults at the time. So I was still required to leave my home and go to work. And I was kind of on the front line of things, not in the hospital sense, but in the sense of working with vulnerable adults and having to don and doff the PPE, which were two
Hmm.
new words that I learned. I was like learning new words. I didn't know you could don and doff things until that point. Uh, so at that time, I started asking a lot of questions and being very confused. I didn't know what was going on, and it didn't seem to make sense to me what we were being told through our mainstream channels. A lot of the guys I was working with and looking after watched a lot of television, where I didn't really, but I would catch a lot of these 6 o'clock nightly news reports. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. These reports don't seem to be geared towards fostering health and wellness and well-being. They look a little more fearful and scary and intimidating and numbers and graphs and all this sort of thing. And so I went kind of searching for alternative interpretations of what was going on. Very quickly found a number of YouTube channels and alternative content creators who were giving a lot of context around the events that was not being included in the mainstream news. And so, to mention a few channels such as The Last American Vagabond or James Corbett. Um, and at some point, James Corbett was talking to a gentleman called Richard Grove, who runs a
Hmm.
podcast called Grand Theft World. And that's still ongoing every Sunday night. And they had this 2 hour conversation in which they were talking to each other about books. And I was listening to the things they were discussing. And I thought, why do I not know about any of this stuff? Why was this like, how did I not know about something like Operation Paperclip?
Hmm.
Right. I just couldn't believe that I got to like over 30 years old and no one had ever mentioned that to me and I never learned about it. But there's books out there written about this. So I thought, okay, I might have to start getting some of these books, right? So I started going to secondhand bookshops in the town I was living in, which had a university. And this is a really good tip. If you live in a place near a university, the secondhand bookshops tend to have good things in them because the university libraries are always upgrading their contents and getting rid of old stuff. And in the
Hmm.
era we live in, which is increasingly 1984, thought police, get rid of certain things and put them in the memory hole, this can be really advantageous to those of us who have a few pounds to and some time to go through those secondhand bookshops and grab what's there. And so I found a book for the paperclip called The Paperclip Conspiracy, and it was by a mainstream author. And I just got it there off the shelf, and I thought, this is blowing my mind. And you get in the book and you read it, and you realize there's all these other references to other books and other documents, and this just opened up my whole worldview to this totally neglected area that had never been spoken to me about, and no one in my circles seemed to know about this stuff. And I had to dig around and go into the kind of censored recesses of the internet to find people talking about these things. And then kind of at the same time as that, I was seeing people getting deplatformed. I was seeing people get their channels hit with censorship strikes and community guideline violations, and they were having being kicked off Facebook, kicked off YouTube. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to make an effort to collect as many of these books as I can, because if I have them in my house, short of the somebody kicking the door down and coming in and invading my home and taking them off me, I have them there and I can refer to them and I can learn from them and I can talk to other people about them, even if the censorship ramps up and gets crazy and we do end up in a kind of Fahrenheit 451 type scenario. So that was my thinking, really, just a concern about levels of censorship and a desire to gather information that was relevant. Because I thought, if I didn't know about this, then there must be, I don't know how many people out there who don't know about this and who would probably
Hmm.
like to know about it. And so that's why I started collecting the books.